I was standing in the impound lot at 3 in the morning, staring at my wife's car through the chain-link fence, when the officer handed me a plastic evidence bag. Inside was her wedding ring, her phone, and a handwritten note that said only 3 words. "I'm sorry, Marcus." The officer was saying something about procedure, about needing my signature, about the condition they found the vehicle in, but I couldn't hear him over the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Sarah had been missing for 14 days. 14 days of police reports and search parties, and sleepless nights wondering if she was alive or hurt or taken by someone. And now, here was her car, abandoned in a parking garage downtown, and inside it was evidence of something I never imagined, something that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my wife, my marriage, and my entire life. But I need to take you back to the beginning, to help you understand how we got here, to show you what we had before it all fell apart. I need you to see what I saw, to feel what I felt, so you can understand why what came next destroyed me so completely before it ultimately set me free. Sarah and I met 9 years ago at a community art class. I had signed up on a whim, trying to find a hobby that didn't involve staring at computer screens after spending all day doing exactly that as a software engineer. She was the instructor, 28 years old, with paint-stained fingers and a smile that made the fluorescent lights of that community center seem warm. She was patient with my terrible attempts at watercolor, encouraging when I mixed colors into muddy browns, genuinely enthusiastic about the smallest improvements in my technique. After the 6th week of classes, I finally worked up the courage to ask her to coffee. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. We were married within a year. Everyone said it was too fast, that we barely knew each other, that we should wait, but when you know, you know. At least that's what I thought. Sarah was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. She was creative where I was analytical. She was spontaneous where I was methodical. She brought color and chaos into my orderly life, and I provided stability and security for her unpredictable artist's existence. We balanced each other perfectly, or so I believed. I made good money in tech, enough that Sarah didn't need to worry about the inconsistent income that came from selling paintings and teaching occasional classes. I told her to focus on her art, to chase her dreams, to create without the pressure of needing every piece to sell. I handled the mortgage on our house, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. I paid for her art supplies, her studio space downtown, her car, her health insurance. I didn't keep track or make her feel indebted. I loved her, and supporting her passion felt like the most natural thing in the world. Sarah was grateful, or at least she seemed to be. She would surprise me with small gestures, cooking my favorite meals, leaving little notes in my work bag, creating small paintings just for me that captured moments from our life together. She called me her rock, her safe harbor, her partner in everything. She told me constantly that she couldn't do what she did without my support, that I made her art possible, that she was the luckiest woman in the world. We had a good life. We hosted dinner parties where Sarah's artist friends would fill our house with laughter and wine-fueled debates about technique and meaning. We took weekend trips to the coast, where Sarah would set up her easel on the beach and paint, while I read or simply watched her work. We talked about having children eventually, buying a bigger house, growing old together. We had plans, shared dreams, a future that seemed solid and certain. About 2 years ago, Sarah became obsessed with a new series of paintings she wanted to create. She called it her breakthrough work, the pieces that would finally get her noticed by serious galleries, that would establish her as a real artist rather than someone who taught community classes and sold landscapes to tourists. She talked about it constantly, showing me sketches, explaining her vision, her eyes bright with an excitement I hadn't seen before. The series required expensive materials, larger canvases, premium paints, special mediums she had researched extensively. I didn't hesitate. I set up a separate account and transferred $15,000 into it, telling her to buy whatever she needed, to not compromise her vision because of cost. She cried when I showed her the account balance, telling me I was making her dreams possible, that she would pay me back someday when the paintings sold, that she loved me more than words could express. She spent the next year working on those paintings, often late into the night at her studio. She became secretive about the work, saying she didn't want to show me anything until the series was complete, that she wanted the full reveal to be perfect. I respected her artistic process, understanding that creators could be protective of unfinished work. I brought her dinner at the studio when she was working late, left her alone when she said she needed solitude, supported her completely, even as I saw her less and less. The paintings were finally finished 8 months ago. She scheduled a showing at a small but respected gallery downtown, sending invitations to collectors and critics, promoting it on social media, treating it like the career-defining moment it was meant to be. I took the day off work to help her transport the paintings, to set up the gallery space, to be there for whatever she needed. But when I asked to see the finished work, to finally view what she had spent a year creating with money and support I had provided, she said no. She wanted me to see them for the first time at the opening with everyone else, to experience them in the proper context. It seemed strange, but I attributed it to artists' superstition or perfectionism. The opening was on a Friday evening. I arrived early, dressed in the suit Sarah had bought me specifically for the occasion, carrying flowers for her, excited to finally see what she had created. The gallery was filling with people, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. I texted her asking where she was. She replied saying she was running late, that I should look at the paintings without her, that she wanted to know my honest reaction before she arrived. I walked through the gallery, looking at the large canvases hung on the white walls. They were abstract pieces, swirls of color and texture, technically accomplished but emotionally opaque to me. I'm not an art expert, but I know what moves me, and these didn't. They felt cold somehow, beautiful but empty. I was trying to find something meaningful to say about them when I noticed the small plaques next to each painting listing the title and price. The prices made me blink. $8,000, $12,000, $15,000. Ambitious pricing for an emerging artist. Then I saw the dedication on the wall at the entrance to the exhibition. In elegant script it read, "This series is dedicated to James, who showed me what it means to truly see and be seen. Thank you for opening my eyes." I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. Who was James? Why wasn't I mentioned? I had funded this entire series, supported her for a year while she worked on it, believed in her when she doubted herself, and she had dedicated it to someone else, someone I had never even heard her mention. I texted her asking about the dedication. She didn't respond. I called. It went to voicemail. I stood in that gallery surrounded by her work I had made possible, feeling invisible and confused and increasingly angry. Other people were arriving, congratulating me on supporting my wife's career, commenting on how proud I must be. I smiled and nodded, and felt like a fool. Sarah arrived an hour later, breathless and apologetic, saying her car had broken down and she had to find an alternative way to get there. She was wearing a new dress I had never seen, expensive looking, her hair styled in a way she usually reserved for special occasions. She kissed me quickly on the cheek and then was swept away by admirers and potential buyers, laughing and gesturing animatedly, completely in her element. I tried to catch her attention several times during the evening to ask about the dedication, but she was always surrounded by people, always busy, always just out of reach. Near the end of the evening, a man approached me, extending his hand. He was about my age, well-dressed, confident in the way people with family money often are. He introduced himself as James Whitmore, saying he was so glad to finally meet me, that Sarah had told him so much about me. The way he said her name, familiar and warm, made something in my chest tighten. I asked how he knew Sarah. He smiled and said they had met at an artist's retreat last year, that he was a collector who had been mentoring her, helping her develop her vision and her career. He said it so casually, like it was common knowledge, like I should already know all of this. I asked Sarah about it on the drive home that night. She was exhausted, she said. Could we talk about it tomorrow? I pressed. She sighed and explained that James was indeed a collector. She had met at a retreat she hadn't told me about because she knew I would worry about her going alone. He had taken an interest in her work, introduced her to people in the art world, given her advice about technique and presentation. The dedication was just a professional courtesy, thanking a mentor. It didn't mean anything more than that. Her explanation was smooth and reasonable, delivered with just enough tiredness that questioning it further seemed petty and suspicious. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I pushed down the uncomfortable feeling in my gut and told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting my insecurities about not understanding her world make me suspicious of normal professional relationships. I congratulated her on the show, told her I was proud of her, and tried to forget about the strange feeling of standing in that gallery surrounded by work I had funded, dedicated to someone else. The paintings sold over the following weeks. Not all of them, but enough that Sarah made about $30,000 after the gallery took their commission. I was happy for her, genuinely pleased that her work was being valued and purchased. I assumed she would deposit the money in our joint account or pay back the $15,000 I had given her for materials. She did neither. When I asked about it, she said she had opened a separate account for her art business, that she needed to keep professional finances separate, that it was important for her sense of independence. It sounded reasonable. Everything she said always sounded reasonable. Over the following months, Sarah became increasingly absent. She was at her studio more often, sometimes not coming home until late at night or even staying overnight, sleeping on the couch there, she said, because she got caught up in work and was too tired to drive. She was always on her phone, texting constantly, smiling at messages she wouldn't share. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was other artists, gallery owners, potential buyers. Always plausible explanations, always just believable enough. She started going to more art events, exhibition openings, networking dinners, always alone, always saying they were boring industry things I wouldn't enjoy, that she'd be home late so I shouldn't wait up. She bought new clothes, more expensive than her usual style, paid for with her art money, she said. She changed her hair, started wearing more makeup, seemed to be transforming into a more polished version of herself. When I commented on it, she said she needed to look professional, that the art world was image conscious, that she was building a brand. I told myself this was normal, that she was finally finding success in her career, that the changes were just part of her professional growth, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was slipping away from me, that the woman I had married was being replaced by someone I didn't know. We barely spent time together anymore. Our conversations were superficial, focused on logistics and schedules. We stopped having those long talks we used to have, where we would share our thoughts and dreams and fears. We became roommates who happened to be married, polite strangers sharing a house. Then, 6 months ago, she told me she needed to go on another artist's retreat. This one was in the mountains, 2 weeks long, focused on intensive creative work, with no outside distractions. That meant no phone service, no internet, complete isolation. She said it was exactly what she needed to work on her next series, that the silence and solitude would help her find new direction. I asked if I could come visit during the 2 weeks, maybe bring her supplies or just see her for a day. She said no, that the retreat had strict rules about no visitors, that the whole point was complete immersion in the creative process. I helped her pack, drove her to the location listed on the retreat website, a rustic lodge 3 hours from our city. I kissed her goodbye, told her I would miss her, that I couldn't wait to see what she created. She smiled and said she loved me, grabbed her bags and walked into the lodge without looking back. I drove home feeling uneasy, but telling myself I was being ridiculous, that couples were allowed to spend time apart, that her needing space for her art didn't mean anything was wrong with our marriage. The 2 weeks were strange. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, volunteering for extra projects. I cleaned the house thoroughly, organized closets, did all the small repairs I'd been putting off. I kept myself busy so I wouldn't think about how quiet the house was, how empty our bed felt, how much I missed simply having her presence nearby even when we weren't really connecting. She was supposed to come home on a Sunday. I prepared her favorite meal, bought flowers, cleaned the house until it sparkled. I was determined to talk to her about how distant we had become, to reconnect, to find our way back to what we used to have. I was ready to admit that I had been neglectful, too focused on work, not attentive enough to her needs. I was ready to fight for us. Sunday came and went. No Sarah, no text, no call, no explanation. The retreat's website listed a phone number, but when I called, it went to a generic voicemail. I tried Sarah's cell phone repeatedly. Every call went straight to voicemail. I texted. No response. By Monday morning, I was genuinely worried. By Monday evening, I was calling hospitals. By Tuesday, I filed a missing persons report. The police were initially unhelpful. Adults had the right to go where they wanted, they said. She had only been out of contact for a couple of days. Maybe she had extended her retreat. Maybe her phone was dead. Maybe she needed more time away. I should give it a few more days before panicking, but I knew something was wrong. Sarah would never just disappear without telling me, would never leave me worried like this. Whatever problems we might have, she wasn't cruel. By Wednesday, the police agreed to investigate. They called the retreat. It took 2 days to get a response. When they did, the retreat coordinator said there was no Sarah registered for any program in the past month. In fact, they hadn't had any 2-week intensive programs scheduled recently. They had no record of her at all. I had dropped her off at a retreat that didn't exist, for a program she was never enrolled in. She had lied to me completely, deliberately, spending what I assumed was significant effort creating a fake story to explain a 2-week absence. The police upgraded her case. They checked her credit cards, her bank accounts, her phone records. The credit cards had been used in various locations around the city in the days after I dropped her off at the fake retreat. Restaurants, hotels, stores. She had been in town the whole time, living her life somewhere else with someone else presumably, while I worried at home. Her phone records showed hundreds of calls and texts to a single number over the past 6 months. When police traced it, it belonged to James Whitmore, the collector, the mentor, the man to whom she had dedicated her paintings. The police located her car 8 days after she disappeared. It had been abandoned in a parking garage downtown, 2 blocks from an expensive hotel. When they processed it, they found her phone in the center console, dead. Her purse was in the passenger seat with her wallet, credit cards and identification still inside, and her wedding ring, which she had promised never to take off, was sitting in the cup holder next to a note in her handwriting. That's when they called me to come identify the items, to explain what I knew, to help them understand what had happened to my wife, because now it was a potential crime scene. Adults leaving their spouses was one thing. Adults abandoning their vehicles with all their possessions, leaving no trace of where they went, that was something different. The detective asked me detailed questions about her state of mind, whether she had been depressed, whether she had mentioned harming herself, whether we had fought. I answered honestly, no, she hadn't seemed depressed. No, she hadn't mentioned anything concerning. No, we hadn't fought because we barely talked anymore. The detective asked about James Whitmore. I told him everything I knew, which wasn't much. The detective made a phone call, spoke in low tones, then hung up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He said they would be speaking with Whitmore, that I should go home and wait, that they would contact me when they knew more. I asked if I could take Sarah's belongings. He said not yet. They were evidence. I asked what I was supposed to do. He said the same thing everyone had been telling me. Wait. I went home to the empty house and finally allowed myself to fall apart. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by her clothes, her paintings, evidence of the life we had built together, and I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. My wife was missing. My wife had been lying to me for months. My wife had taken off her wedding ring and left it in her car like something she was discarding. Nothing made sense. Everything hurt. The detective called the next morning. James Whitmore had been cooperative, he said. He had admitted to a relationship with Sarah, said it had been going on for about 8 months since shortly after her exhibition. He said Sarah had told him she was planning to leave me, that she was going to ask for a separation, that she just needed to find the right time. He said they had been together the week she claimed to be on retreat, staying at his place, making plans for their future. But then, he said, Sarah had become agitated, guilty, confused. She had left his apartment 6 days ago saying she needed time to think, that she would be in touch. He hadn't heard from her since. He claimed he was worried too, that he had no idea where she was. The detective asked if I had life insurance on Sarah. The question made me feel sick, the implication clear. I said yes, we both had policies through my work, standard benefit package stuff. He noted that information without expression. He asked if our marriage had been troubled. I said honestly that it had become distant, but I thought we were going through a normal rough patch. He asked if I had ever suspected her of having an affair. I admitted that I had wondered, but had convinced myself I was being paranoid. He wrote everything down, his pen scratching across paper, documenting the destruction of my life. They searched for Sarah everywhere. Police checked hotels, shelters, bus stations, airports. They interviewed her friends, her fellow artists, her family. Everyone had the same story. Sarah had seemed happy recently, more confident, talking about exciting changes coming in her life. No one had seen her in over a week. No one knew where she was. It was like she had simply evaporated, leaving behind only her abandoned possessions and a trail of lies. I spent those 2 weeks in a fog of anxiety and grief and rage. I called in sick to work, unable to concentrate on anything. I searched our house for clues, reading through old documents, checking her belongings, trying to piece together the story of her deception. I found receipts hidden in her studio for expensive dinners and hotel rooms. I found sketches in her notebooks that looked intimate, personal, obviously inspired by time spent with someone. I found a burner phone in a box in her closet, powered off, filled with messages between her and James that left nothing to my imagination. Reading those messages broke something fundamental in me. They weren't just about sex, though there was plenty of that detailed in ways that made me want to throw the phone against the wall. They were about life, about dreams, about all the things she used to share with me, but had been sharing with him instead. She wrote about how James understood her in ways I never could, how he appreciated her art on a level I was incapable of reaching, how being with him made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. She wrote that staying with me felt like living a lie, that she was only there out of obligation and guilt, that she was planning to leave as soon as she figured out how. And then there were the messages about money. James had apparently been encouraging her to access more of our shared resources, to start separating our finances, to secure her own future. She wrote about how much I had in my retirement accounts, about the equity in our house, about how much she would be entitled to in a separation. He coached her on what to say to lawyers, how to document my income, how to maximize what she could claim. They had been planning the financial aspects of her leaving me with the same care people usually reserved for planning weddings. I took the phone to the police. They added it to their evidence. The detective looked at me with something that might have been sympathy and said I should contact a lawyer, that regardless of what had happened to Sarah, I needed to protect my interests. His tone suggested he had theories about what had happened to my wife, theories that made me a suspect. 2 weeks after Sarah's car was found, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, expecting police or maybe her family. Instead, I heard Sarah's voice, thin and shaky, saying my name. I almost dropped the phone. I asked where she was, if she was safe, what had happened. She started crying, saying she was sorry that she had made terrible mistakes, that everything had gone wrong. I asked her to tell me where she was so I could come get her. She said she couldn't, that I wouldn't understand, that it was complicated. I told her I had found the phone, that I knew about James, that I knew everything. There was a long silence. Then she said something that made me grip the phone so hard my hand cramped. She said she had left James, that she had realized he didn't actually care about her, that he had been using her. She said she had needed time to figure out what to do, where to go, how to handle the mess she had created. She had been staying with a friend I had never met, someone from the art world, trying to decide what came next. She wanted to come home. She wanted to explain everything. She wanted another chance. I asked her why she had left her ring, her phone, everything in her car. She said she had been planning to disappear entirely, to start over somewhere new, but she realized she couldn't do it, that she was too scared, too guilty. She had panicked and run, leaving everything behind. She said it was the biggest mistake of her life. She said a lot of things, words tumbling over each other, excuses and apologies and justifications mixing together into a narrative that was supposed to make me forgive her. I listened to all of it in silence, feeling strangely detached, like I was hearing about someone else's life. When she finally stopped talking, I asked her one question. Did James give her money? There was a pause, then a quiet, yes. I asked how much. She said $50,000. I asked what she had done with it. She said it was in an account he had helped her open, separate from anything we had together, somewhere safe where I couldn't access it. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't about love or passion or finding herself. This was about money. James had targeted my wife, manipulated her with attention and validation, convinced her to extract resources from our marriage, and then likely planned to take that money for himself somehow. Sarah had been so focused on the romance of it all that she hadn't seen she was being conned. Or maybe she had seen it, but liked the financial benefits too much to care. I asked her if she understood what she had done. She said yes, that she knew she had hurt me, that she wanted to make it right. I told her that coming home wasn't possible, that I didn't trust her, that I didn't even recognize her anymore. She started crying harder, begging me to at least hear her out, to let her explain in person. I told her to call the police and let them know she was safe, that people had been searching for her, that her disappearance had been a major investigation. She said she couldn't face them, that she was too ashamed. I told her she didn't have a choice, that if she didn't contact them within the hour, I would tell them she had called. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I called the detective and told him about the call, that Sarah was alive and safe, that she had been hiding out voluntarily. He asked if I knew where she was. I said I didn't, that she wouldn't tell me. He asked what else she had said. I gave him the summary, including the part about the money from James. He thanked me and said he would be in touch. Sarah contacted the police that evening, arranged to come in and give a statement. I wasn't there for it, but the detective called me afterward to share the relevant information. Sarah admitted to the affair, to lying about the retreat, to planning to leave me. She claimed James had told her he loved her, that he wanted to build a life with her, that he would support her art career in ways I never could. She said he had given her money to help her get established, to give her independence, to prove his commitment. But then, she told police, James had changed. Once he had convinced her to open the separate account and transfer the money there, he started making demands. He wanted her to get more money from me before she left, wanted her to access my retirement accounts, wanted her to secure as much as possible in the separation. When she hesitated, saying that seemed wrong, that she didn't want to destroy me financially, he had become cold. He told her she was being naive, that I would be fine, that she deserved compensation for years of supporting me emotionally. His argument had been sophisticated and manipulative, turning my support of her into her support of me in some twisted logic. When Sarah had started to realize what was happening, that James was more interested in my money than in her, she had confronted him. He had laughed, she said, and told her she should be grateful for the education he had given her, that $50,000 was more than her art was worth, that she should take the money and disappear before I figured out what she had been planning. She had left his apartment devastated, realizing she had thrown away her marriage for someone who saw her as a mark, not a partner. She had driven to the parking garage, parked her car, and sat there for hours trying to figure out what to do. She was too ashamed to come home, too humiliated to face me, too disgusted with herself to continue. She had taken off her ring, left her phone, grabbed only a small bag of clothes from the trunk, and walked away. She had stayed with someone she met at an art class, someone who didn't know me, who didn't ask questions, who let her hide in their spare room while she figured out her next move. The police asked if she wanted to press charges against James for any crimes. She said she couldn't think of anything criminal he had done. Everything had been consensual. She had willingly taken his money, willingly lied to me, willingly destroyed her own life. James was guilty of being a manipulative person, but that wasn't illegal. The police closed their missing person investigation. Sarah was alive and safe. Case solved. Except nothing was solved. My wife had reappeared, but the woman I married was still gone, replaced by this stranger who had betrayed me in every possible way. She started calling me daily, leaving voicemails apologizing, explaining, begging. She said she wanted to come home, to go to counseling, to rebuild what we had. She said the affair was over, that she understood now that James had been using her, that I was the good one, the real one, the person who actually loved her. She said everything she thought I needed to hear to take her back. I let her voicemails pile up unanswered. I blocked her number eventually, tired of the notifications, tired of her voice in my ear repeating the same themes. I contacted a lawyer, a vicious one recommended by a colleague who had gone through a difficult separation. I explained everything, showing him the evidence I had collected, the burner phone, the text messages, the financial records. He smiled in a way that made me understand why people hired him. He filed for separation immediately, citing abandonment and adultery. He documented every instance of her deception, every dollar she had spent on her affair, every lie she had told. He requested full disclosure of all her accounts, including the one James had helped her open. He made it clear that I was not going to be a cooperative spouse making this easy for her. I was going to fight for every asset, every penny, every piece of what we had built together. Sarah's response came through her own lawyer, a document full of defensive justifications and counterclaims. She argued that I had been emotionally distant, that I hadn't appreciated her as an artist, that I had treated her like a dependent rather than a partner. She claimed the money James gave her was a gift, not marital property, that she was entitled to keep it. She requested half of everything we owned, including my retirement accounts and the house, claiming she had sacrificed her career potential to be supportive of mine. The legal battle was exhausting and expensive and brutal. Every aspect of our life together was examined, documented, assigned a monetary value. The house we had chosen together, decorated together, lived in together, became a disputed asset. The retirement accounts I had built through years of careful saving became contested property. Even the art supplies I had bought her became a point of negotiation, with her claiming she needed them for her livelihood, and me arguing that I had purchased them and they were mine to reclaim. During the discovery process, my lawyer uncovered something interesting. The account James had helped Sarah open wasn't actually in her name alone. It was a joint account, with James listed as a co-owner. Sarah apparently hadn't realized this when she signed the paperwork, trusting James to handle the details. It meant that James had legal access to every dollar in that account, could withdraw funds at any time, could empty it entirely if he chose. My lawyer contacted Sarah's lawyer with this information, not out of kindness, but to demonstrate how thoroughly she had been manipulated, how poor her judgment had been, how her claims of being a savvy, independent person were contradicted by her actions. Sarah panicked when she learned about the account structure. She tried to withdraw the money immediately, only to discover that James had already withdrawn most of it, leaving less than $10,000 in the account. She had been so focused on our separation that she hadn't been monitoring the account, hadn't noticed the unauthorized transfers, hadn't realized that while she was fighting me for half of everything I owned, her partner in crime was stealing from her. She tried to report it to the police as theft, They explained that as a co-owner of the account, James had legal right to withdraw funds. Unless she could prove fraud or coercion in how the account was set up, there was nothing they could do. Sarah had signed the paperwork herself. She had deposited the money into an account she knew he had access to. She had trusted him, and he had taken advantage of that trust in a way that was unethical but not criminal. My lawyer used this information beautifully in our proceedings. He argued that Sarah had demonstrated profound financial irresponsibility, that she had hidden assets during our marriage, that she had conspired with another person to extract resources from our partnership, and that she had then lost those resources through her own poor judgment. He argued that Sarah should receive minimal settlement because she had already received substantial compensation through James's initial payment, and what happened to that money afterward was her responsibility, not mine. Sarah's lawyer tried to argue that she was a victim, that James had manipulated her, that she deserved sympathy and fair treatment despite her mistakes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The text messages showed her actively participating in planning how to maximize what she could get from me. The timeline showed her spending months lying and preparing her exit. The financial records showed her hiding money in a separate account while still having access to our joint accounts. She had been neither a naive victim nor an honest partner. She had been a willing participant in a scheme that had backfired spectacularly. The judge was a woman in her 60s who had presumably seen every variation of marital dysfunction during her career. She reviewed the evidence with a neutral expression, asked pointed questions of both lawyers, and then delivered her ruling. The house was to be sold and the proceeds split, but Sarah had to reimburse me for her share of the mortgage payments I had made alone during the separation. My retirement accounts remained mine, untouchable, the judge noting that Sarah had already received significant funds from James and had lost them through her own choices. Sarah was entitled to keep whatever remained in the account James had helped her open, which was basically nothing. The judge also ordered Sarah to pay a portion of my legal fees, noting that her deception and abandonment had necessitated the legal proceedings. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Not quite satisfaction, though there was some of that. Not quite sadness, though there was plenty of that too. Mostly I felt exhausted, drained by months of legal battles and emotional turmoil, but I also felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. My life was my own again. I wasn't tied to someone who had betrayed me. I wasn't supporting someone who valued me only for what I could provide. I was free, and that freedom was worth more than any settlement could have been. The house sold within a month. I used my portion to buy a smaller place closer to my office, a modern condo with no memories attached, no rooms where I could imagine her presence. I donated or threw away almost everything from our marriage, keeping only a few items that had value independent of their association with her. I started fresh, surrounding myself with new furniture, new art from artists who weren't her, new everything. Sarah tried to contact me after the separation was final. She sent emails apologizing again, saying she understood if I never wanted to speak to her, but hoping we could at least be civil. She said she had learned from her mistakes, that she was in therapy, that she had cut off all contact with James after he emptied their account. She said she hoped I could eventually forgive her, not for her sake but for mine, so I could move on without carrying anger. I never responded, not out of ongoing anger, but because there was simply nothing left to say. She had made her choices. I had made mine. We were both living with the consequences. Communication would serve no purpose except to keep me connected to a past I was working hard to leave behind. I did hear through mutual acquaintances what happened to both Sarah and James after everything fell apart. Sarah moved back in with her parents in another state, unable to afford rent in our city without my income. She tried to continue her art career, but her reputation had taken a hit. The art world, as small and gossipy as any community, knew about her affair, her deception, her poor judgment. Galleries that had shown interest before were suddenly unavailable. Collectors who had purchased her earlier work weren't interested in new pieces. She was teaching community classes again, back where she started, but now carrying the weight of humiliation and regret. James, it turned out, had done this before. After Sarah filed complaints and made noise about him stealing her money, other women came forward with similar stories. He had a pattern of targeting artists, particularly women, offering mentorship and financial support, encouraging them to extract money from their partners or their families, helping them set up accounts he could access, and then disappearing with the funds. He was sophisticated about staying just on the right side of the law, never quite crossing into territory that would result in criminal charges. He was a predator who hunted in the art world, and Sarah had been far from his first victim. Several women tried to sue him in civil court. Most settlements were minimal because the women had willingly signed account papers and deposited money into accounts they knew he could access. James had lawyers and resources to fight every claim. He would probably continue his pattern, finding new vulnerable artists repeating the cycle. Sarah had learned an expensive lesson about trust and judgment, and she had paid for it with her marriage, her money, and her reputation. As for me, I spent the year after the separation rebuilding my sense of self, rediscovering who I was independent of being someone's husband, someone's provider, someone's safe harbor. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion I had been positioned for before everything fell apart. I traveled alone to places Sarah and I had talked about visiting, but never prioritized. I took up hobbies I had abandoned during my marriage. I learned to cook properly, to maintain my own space, to enjoy my own company. I also cautiously started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee meetings and casual dinners, learning how to be single in my late 30s after nearly a decade of marriage. I was careful, probably too careful, seeing red flags everywhere, questioning every woman's motivations. My therapist said it would take time to rebuild trust, that I shouldn't rush into anything serious until I had fully processed what had happened with Sarah. Then I met Elena at a work conference, a project manager from a different company, smart and funny and refreshingly direct. We talked for hours about everything except past relationships, focusing instead on ideas and projects and the future. When she asked me to dinner, I hesitated, then agreed. When dinner led to more dinners, I was honest with her about my recent separation, my lingering trust issues, my need to take things slowly. She said she had been through her own painful breakup, that she understood completely, that slow was good. Elena was nothing like Sarah. She was practical where Sarah had been dreamy. She was grounded where Sarah had been flighty. She had her own career, her own money, her own clear sense of self. She didn't need someone to support her dreams because she was already living them. She didn't need someone to make her feel special because she already knew her worth. Being with her was easy, in ways my marriage never had been. No drama or secrets or games, just two adults choosing to spend time together because they enjoyed each other's company. We've been together for almost 2 years now. We don't live together yet, both of us valuing our independence, both of us cautious about merging our lives too quickly. We have separate finances and no shared accounts. We split expenses evenly and keep careful records. Some people might see that as unromantic or overly cautious, but for me it's exactly right. I learned the hard way what can happen when you blindly trust someone with access to your resources. I learned that love and money should be kept separate until trust is proven over time, not assumed from the beginning. Eleanor understands my caution. She has her own from her past experiences. We talk openly about our boundaries and our needs. We don't make grand promises about forever. We take each day as it comes, building something solid through consistent actions rather than romantic declarations. It might not be the fairy tale I imagined in my 20s, but it's real and honest and healthy, in ways my marriage never was. I think sometimes about the man I was when I dropped Sarah off at that fake retreat, so trusting and supportive, so determined to believe the best about her despite the evidence accumulating that something was wrong. I don't judge him harshly. He loved someone and chose to trust her. That's not a character flaw. What happened next wasn't his fault. But I'm not that man anymore. I'm someone who trusts carefully, who verifies before accepting, who protects himself while still remaining open to connection. I'm someone who learned that sometimes people you love will hurt you deeply, and the only thing you can control is how you respond to that hurt. Sarah's disappearance and the discovery of what was in her car changed everything, but not in the way I initially thought. It didn't destroy me, though it felt like it would at the time. Instead, it destroyed my illusions, my naive belief that love and support were enough to keep someone faithful, my assumption that I could control outcomes by being a good partner. It forced me to see reality clearly, to recognize manipulation and deception, to protect myself rather than hoping someone else would value me enough not to harm me. The note Sarah left in her car, those 3 words, "I'm sorry, Marcus," meant nothing. She was sorry she got caught. Sorry her plan failed. Sorry she lost access to my resources. She wasn't sorry for the months of lies, for the calculated betrayal, for the deliberate destruction of trust. Real apologies come with changed behavior, with restitution, with accountability. Sarah offered only words, repeated endlessly but never backed by meaningful action. I keep that note, not as a reminder of her or what we had, but as a reminder to myself. A reminder that people will say whatever they think you need to hear to get what they want. A reminder that actions reveal truth far more reliably than words. A reminder that protecting yourself isn't selfish or cynical. It's necessary and wise. A reminder that I survived something I thought would destroy me, and I can trust myself to handle whatever comes next. Today, if you asked me if I'm happy, I would say yes, without hesitation. Not because everything in my life is perfect, but because I'm living authentically, protecting myself wisely, and building something real with someone who values honesty as much as I do. I'm successful in my career, secure in my finances, surrounded by genuine friends and at peace with my past. The pain of Sarah's betrayal is still there, probably always will be to some degree, but it doesn't control me anymore. It's just part of my story, the chapter that taught me the most important lessons about trust, boundaries, and my own resilience. I learned that you can't make someone love you through sacrifice. You can't ensure loyalty through support. You can't control another person's choices no matter how much you love them. You can only control yourself, your reactions, your boundaries, your willingness to stay or leave. And sometimes leaving, protecting yourself, choosing your own well-being over trying to save a relationship is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Sarah wanted the excitement of someone new, the validation of being desired by someone wealthy and cultured, the fantasy of a different life. She got it briefly, and then learned the hard way that fantasies don't survive contact with reality. James wanted access to money through manipulating vulnerable people. He got it repeatedly, and will probably continue getting it until enough victims come forward to make his pattern undeniable. And I wanted a partner who valued our life together enough to be honest with me. I didn't get that with Sarah, but I'm building it now with Elena, carefully and intentionally, with eyes wide open and boundaries firmly in place. If you're reading this, and you recognize aspects of your own relationship, if you're making excuses for behavior that troubles you, if you're sacrificing yourself trying to keep someone who isn't fully committed, please learn from my experience. Trust is earned through consistent behavior over time, not declared at the beginning and assumed forever. Support should be reciprocal, not one-sided. Love should make your life richer, not leave you feeling depleted and questioning your worth. And if someone you love betrays you, it says everything about them and nothing about your value as a person. The woman who disappeared for 2 weeks destroyed my marriage but couldn't destroy me. The evidence I found in her car showed me the truth about who she really was, which hurt terribly but also freed me to build something better. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed, even if you would never choose it. Sometimes losing everything forces you to discover what actually matters. Sometimes betrayal teaches you lessons that would have taken decades to learn any other way. I'm grateful now, in a complicated way, for everything that happened. Not grateful it happened, but grateful for who I became because of it. I'm stronger, wiser, more careful, but also more genuine. I know my worth isn't dependent on anyone else recognizing it. I know I can survive devastating loss and rebuild something better. I know that protecting myself isn't the opposite of loving others. It's a prerequisite for healthy love. And I know that no matter what happens next in my life, I'll handle it, because I've already survived something I thought would destroy me. Have you ever discovered something that completely changed how you saw your relationship? What did you learn about yourself in the process?